Well, my story is really unique because I was the oldest of four. And so I didn't have like the parental guidance and support. So actually, from the time I was 10, I raised my three younger siblings. So I had two parents in the home, but the dynamic was that I was really their caretaker. So at 18, college wasn't an option for me. I knew that if I went away to school, then my siblings wouldn't be taken care of. So I actually went back to school as an adult learner, getting my associates, undergrad, and graduate degrees, and graduating at the top of my class with each of those degrees. And so that was kind of, I think, inspiring to know that even though I didn't have a traditional path, that I still, was able to see that I too had my own path, and putting in that hard work was rewarded.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Palacio and Partners, providing turnkey podcast creation, hosting, production, promotion, and related creative resources for you and your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Chandra Clark. Chandra is the president of the Corey C. Griffin Foundation in Boston, Massachusetts. Previous roles include the executive director of VHL Alliance, the inaugural director of community outreach for Big Brothers Big Sisters Kansas City, and the founder of Be Loved, a lifestyle brand. Chandra has received numerous awards and recognitions, including the Young Athena Leadership Award from the Kansas City Chamber, the Rockhurst Faber Young Alum of the Year Award from Rockhurst University, Top Connector in Education and Entrepreneurship from the Kauffman Foundation, and the Most Influential Women in Kansas City Business Award from the Kansas City Business Journal. Chandra holds a Master of Education degree from Rockhurst University, a Bachelor of Liberal Arts degree from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and is a graduate of the Central Exchange Emerging Leaders Program. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Chandra.
Chandra, welcome to the Corporate Couch this morning.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah. The great Kansas City legend, Andre Davis, introduced us. So very excited. I think we had our first meeting via Zoom back in March, and now we're recording here on a Friday, August 15th. So, yeah, very excited to have you on the podcast. You got more awards than Patrick Mahomes. Love your glasses. Very fashionable. Yeah, but let's start with a fun question. Chandra, even though people know you fairly well because you're pretty active on social media and LinkedIn, what one thing would surprise them about you?
I think one thing that would surprise people about me is that I'm obsessed with mafia movies.
Oh, really? Okay.
So my favorite movie of all time is The Godfather.
Oh, yeah.
And anytime that I tell people that, they're surprised. But I love a good mafia action power play in a movie.
That was one of the few movies where I think it was better than the book. I guess that was one of my favorite movies, too. How about Goodfellas? You like Goodfellas, too?
Love Goodfellas, The Untouchables, Scarface. Yeah.
Chandra, where'd you grow up, and what was fun for you growing up?
I was actually born in Louisiana, and I lived in Lake Charles, Louisiana until I was 10. So Creole, Southern girl. I think what was fun for me was hot summers and mosquitoes, being outside. I loved it.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, so you would just play outside. Did you participate in any activities, art, drama, sports? Now just playing outside with friends.
playing
Yeah.
outside with friends, because at that time, my grandparents were super strict. So I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, so I couldn't leave the porch. And funny story, my grandmother called me Shonda. So up until the day she died, she thought my name started with an S and it starts with the C.
Right.
And so she would say, Shonda, you better not leave that porch, So I would just stay outside, like
Right.
in a fenced in area with friends. But as I'm older now, I miss that just Southern vibe and just being out in the
Yeah.
hot, steamy summers with mosquitoes.
Right. Now I know you love art and fashion. Did you kind of dress up? Were you in dress up, or tell us how you got that passion?
I did. So I love dresses from the time I was young. And I was the person who would, if I had one dress, I would wear it to school all the time with my dress shoes. I have always had a deep love for fashion and art. And it wasn't actually until I think I was in middle school that I realized that there were other careers than being a model, because I only wanted to be a model and a ballerina. And unfortunately, I didn't have access to do those things.
Right.
My parents, they weren't equipped to put me in those types of activities.
Right.
But I've always had a love for it. So as I've gotten older, I've actually, I modeled for 12 years.
Wow.
I have a deep love for dance and art, and it's just deeply integrated into even the work that I do.
Yeah, very cool. I recall that when we first met, that somehow maybe it was your grandparents were into the voodoo. Talk about that.
Oh, Jeff, you're so funny. Yes. So, again, going back to a Creole girl. So, actually, some Haitian Creole. And so, on both sides of my family, my ancestors have ties to voodoo. And on my dad's side of the family, his great grandparents were actually voodoo practitioners by trade. They referred to themselves as healers. And so it was how they, made their living. And then over time, generationally, there's actually a book of spells that they have passed down to other family members.
Wow, love that. I would not want to be an enemy of your family back then. I mean, that would be not good.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. And what's fascinating is, because I remember the conversation you and I had, which was great. A lot of people, say that they don't believe that it exists, and I'm like, everyone to me should take a trip to New Orleans and just experience the culture, and knowing that it is very much a religion and a way of life, and that it's very real.
Yeah, every city is unique, but I think New Orleans is just so different. In Louisiana, I think it's just it's a different culture, and it's great, it's phenomenal, but it is very different than almost any other U.S. city by far.
It is.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think we got in that conversation because I think I did an introduction possibly to Karen Webster, who I work with, and got us into this kind of not standard thinking practices in terms of life and healing, and kind of alternative methods. So at 18, you graduate high school. What was kind of your thinking in terms of, hey, what am I going to do now?
Well, my story is really unique because I was the oldest of four. And so I didn't have like the parental guidance and support. So actually from the time I was 10, I raised my three younger siblings. So I had two parents in the home, but the dynamic was that I was really their caretaker. So at 18, college wasn't an option for me. I knew that if I went away to school, then my siblings wouldn't be taken care of. So I actually went back to school as an adult learner, getting my associates, undergrad, and graduate degrees, and graduating at the top of my class with each of those degrees. And so that was kind of, I think, inspiring to know that even though I didn't have a traditional path, that I still, was able to see that I too had my own path, and putting in that hard work was rewarded.
Yeah.
my life was definitely a winding road. I didn't have mentorship and guidance, which is why I'm so passionate about young people. And I think, every day for me it's recognizing, especially in a place like Boston, that's so traditional. It's families, you go to college, you get married, you buy a home. And my path has just been so different. And so it's, even in this stage of my life, realizing that all of those things that I went through were for a higher purpose, and that you can't compare your life to other people's.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, you're younger than I am, but kind of our generations where that you had a path. You graduate high school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, you have kids. But I think as today's generation, there's a great book by Chase Jarvis called "Play It Safe" that was just released, I think, earlier this year. And it talks about, there's so many different paths now. Everybody has a unique path. And, I've interviewed, 160 people on this podcast and some other podcasts that I host. And, everybody has a winding road, and it's, almost no one has a career strategy, and I just think, for those that do want to go to college, and, speaking for myself, 18-year-olds shouldn't have to make a $250,000 decision, give or take, in terms of what they want to do and what they want to be and what school they want to go to. It's just, there's so many different ways to learn. And I think, the educational systems, K through 12 are starting to recognize that, where you can go, you can graduate high school with a trade degree in, plumbing or HVAC or whatever, and, walk out of high school and start making $80,000 a year, which is great. So there's different ways, and there's so many different ways to learn today. And, it's much easier to start your own business and be a solopreneur. So, so do you think, obviously you had great responsibility, taking care of your 3 siblings. There was obviously formative years, and you're a caretaker, but how do you think that affected you in terms of the path you chose career-wise?
That's a great question, because I was thinking about that actually this morning in my current role as president of Corey Griffin Foundation. And the anniversary of Corey's death is actually tomorrow. So it will be tomorrow that he, passed away 11 years ago. And I was thinking of, this idea that I have this great desire to honor his legacy, to respect his legacy, but also the responsibility that I have for the organization and just supporting his family. And so I think that last part, responsibility, is something that has contributed to my leadership, which has led me into nonprofit work. I actually love nonprofit, being a leader in the nonprofit sector. It is definitely, it's an interesting dynamic because it's stressful. It's very political. You have to wear many hats. But I think especially the very difficult parts of my upbringing brought me to a place where I realized that I wanted to live in service to others and to also be able to bring healing in my work. And I really believe that I can do that in nonprofit. Usually
I talk about the most current job and role in your life at the end when I talk to people, but you brought Corey up. So talk about the Corey C. Griffin Foundation. You're the first president, leader of that organization ever, but talk about his legacy and what you're trying to do there. Corey C. Griffin Foundation, we're a nonprofit organization, so we function more as a VC. So we raise funds, and we grant those funds out we actually support 10 charities now. And so our pillars align with faith, health and mental health, and leadership and character development. And we've been in existence for 11 years. So at the time that Corey passed, his family, in the midst of their grief, received $2 million and took those funds and funded the organization. So, now as president, I'm excited to say that we have grown up as an organization. So went from a startup to a growth phase. And his legacy is one of love. I'm not a Boston native. I've lived here for 5 years.
Again, been in this role for 3, and there is not a day that goes by that I don't hear from someone or meet someone who knew him and just had phenomenal things to say about him and his desire to love and support others. And I think one of the things that's really beautiful to me personally is that Corey wasn't perfect. He loved life. He, had his different nuances and quirks, and yet he has this phenomenal legacy that I believe will continue to live on and on for many years. And so, going back to your earlier comment about 18-year-olds having to make a decision on, this multi-million-dollar decision on their career, I think what Corey represents to me is someone who believed in people. And that is what made him so powerful. And so it wasn't about perfection. And I think when we look at our careers, sometimes we put so much pressure on being perfect versus truly being passionate.
Talk about, when you first, stopped caring for your siblings and went out on your own. Talk about, that process for you and how you navigated and pick jobs and things like that, as well as, I think everyone's childhood has their own challenges and shit that happens basically. And you have to kind of navigate through that as you, grow older and, get around it and, rise above it. So talk about that process for you.
Yeah, Jeff, it was a hot mess. When I go and talk to youth, that's what I tell them. I had 25 jobs. Again, I didn't have the support, unfortunately, at home. I didn't know what I was doing. And so if you imagine, the low self-esteem, the low self-worth, the lack of direction. And so I'm in these jobs that, were not the right fit. You're trying to pay the bills. And so you accept anything that's given to you. So you're in these environments that are, toxic and dysfunctional. And it actually took me, I would say probably at the time I graduated from my graduate program, again, as an adult, that I had my first experience volunteering at Harvesters, which led me into my love of nonprofit work. And so I was able to, at some point, shift the shame that I felt from having multiple jobs, from people judging me, saying, you don't know what you want to do with your life, what's wrong with you, to, oh, wait a minute, I actually love giving unto others. And so my first job after I graduated from graduate school was working at a domestic violence shelter in Kansas City. It was the one that served primarily women of color. It was in the northeastern part of town. It was the most overlooked shelter. But I realized that I was no different from those women and children. At that time, I'm 30 years old, gone through a divorce, raising a 5-year-old. And so I poured my heart into that work. I would go, I'd work 8 to 5. I go pick my daughter up from school, pick up dinner for her, bring her back to the shelter so that we could have volunteers come in to support the women and children. So, my transition into adulthood, again, was difficult. I've had to do a lot of healing work to look and say, wait a minute, if you don't have these foundational things, you don't know what to do. We expect so much out of people when if they don't have tools and resources, how are they supposed to navigate? So for me, it was a very difficult experience.
I've interviewed guests on the podcast. I have friends that didn't graduate college, maybe didn't even go, and it seems like I don't know if it's a chip on the shoulder, or it's something that's just they feel like it's missing. And I always say, especially to friends that I've chatted with about when they express that concern, and I go, "You're so successful. You make a lot of money. Like, who cares if you have it? You were 8-9 credits shy of a college, should I go back to school?" I'm like, no, why? Why go back? If somebody doesn't want you because you don't have a college degree and all your experience you have, you don't want to work for that person,
right? Or
that company, right? And I think it's definitely more accepting today. But Chandra, did you have mentors, somebody that that helped you through this process, right? Because you didn't have that support system growing up through your parents. So what was that for you? Whether it was books or people, talk about that.
That's a great question. And so my first mentor, actually, his name is Dwayne Hallock. I haven't talked to him in years, but when I was in my graduate program at Rockhurst, he came to speak to a class about nonprofit work. He worked at American Red Cross at the time, and he became my mentor. And he really changed my life because he talked to me, especially as a woman of color. He's a white man. And he taught me to see life without the lens of limitations. He helped me to see myself as an asset versus a liability. He really talked to me about the importance of being humble and being passionate about work. And he also had just a great sense of humor. He's this bigwig at American Red Cross, but would just pour into me and was so extremely kind. And so that changed my life. And something that I also tell a lot of people about, especially as a woman of color, is it is actually my white male mentors that I've really learned the most from, because I have learned to come out of a place of deeply rooted oppression and, all the systemic barriers, all the things that I'm told that are against me. And I've had incredible men, come alongside of me and give me wisdom and advice and help to develop me as a leader. And that's really changed my life.
Talk about, you not only get an undergraduate degree, but you decide to get a master's. So what was your thinking there? It's like, do I need a master's, or what was your thinking process?
Yeah. So I actually went to graduate school out of fear because I'm 30 years old. I went through a divorce. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I still really, I know that I'm loving actually I hadn't got introduced to nonprofit yet because I was just coming out of undergrad. So at the time I was thinking, I should go into education because that was like the easier thing to do. And so I knew that I needed advanced education if I wanted to have the resources to really take care of my daughter. And I'm so happy that I did, because I went to Rockhurst. It's a Jesuit university. So it was also being rooted in this environment that was filled with faith and just so much overwhelming support that I just felt a sense of comfort. And of course, there were days that I didn't want to show up. I'm having to leave my daughter with my family because I'm working full time and taking night classes. But I'm so happy I had my master's degree because it actually gave me the leverage to navigate through my career the way I wanted to.
So it looked like you founded your own not-for-profit called Model. Talk about that process and what were you trying to achieve there. And it looked like maybe that was right after you graduated or during your Rockhurst experience.
Yes, it was. So I was very active in my church at the time. And so Model was an acronym for Masterpiece of Divine Eternal Love. So my focus was young women ages 13 to 21. And so we would do, skill development workshops. We would do modeling, create opportunities for the girls to come out and model and be on stage. And I would do community-wide events. And it was something that really came out of pain. It was like that pain out of, aligning pain with purpose, because going through a divorce, you feel humiliated, you feel ashamed. I really realized, Jeff, I didn't know what was going on. I just had adversity after challenge after challenge after challenge. And so Model was my baby, and I loved it. And then I realized I actually need to have the business savvy if I really want to have my own nonprofit. And so that's what led me to Newhouse, which was the domestic violence shelter.
Are you drowning in boring corporate communications? Palacio and Partners is here to rescue you. We transform internal podcasts from snooze fest to must-listen content that actually connects your team and strengthens your culture. Imagine podcast episodes that make your employees laugh while staying informed. Our founder, Jeff Palacio, doesn't just create podcasts. He creates conversations that break through the noise. Whether you're a growing startup or a massive corporation, we turn your company's story into audio gold. Leadership becomes human. Remote teams feel connected. Your message cuts through the clutter. Palacio and Partners, where corporate communications gets a fun makeover. Let's make your podcast work harder than your email inbox ever could. Jeff is happy to share his insights on podcasting with you. You can contact him via LinkedIn or schedule a Zoom call via the link in the episode description.
You were at the Kaufman Scholars also doing some work there, and I was not familiar with it, but it looked like is it the program still in existence today? And talk about that.
No, so I think it sunsetted maybe 2 years ago, but Kaufman, again, that was an experience in my career that changed my life because Mr. Kaufman was very entrepreneurial. And so, the Griffin Foundation was this $2 billion organization, and Kaufman Scholars was a subset of that organization. And Mr. Kaufman, through his work, really wanted to leave a legacy. And so Kaufman Scholars was a scholarship program created for inner city kids who wanted to pursue a 4 to 5 year degree, post-secondary degree. And so I joined Kaufman Scholars as a coach. We had these cohorts of students in various schools that we would go meet with them and do one-on-one coaching and group coaching. But the goal was to make sure that they would persist through high school on to post-secondary success. So holistically realizing that it wasn't enough to give them a scholarship. They actually needed, someone who was coaching and guiding them. And if they were having difficulties, helping to connect them with the right resources. So that role changed my life too, because, at the time, of course, Mr. Kaufman had passed, but there was this spirit throughout this organization of philanthropy and community that really was inspiring to me.
Those non-Kansas City natives listening, you and Kaufman started Marion Labs. He influenced so many lives in Kansas City. The Kansas City Royals play in Kaufman Stadium, and so many people spun out of Marion Labs and created their own businesses and were very successful. So his impact through his leadership at Marion and the Griffin Foundation is still helping Kansas City in so many ways. So you don't have to go through every job, but you kind of go through. 25, we'd be here all day, but I thought I had a lot of jobs, which I have. I was called a job hopper.
Me too.
Which was idiotic because, 9 different companies I work for or divisions of companies, I involuntary exited, meaning they moved from, Kansas City to Dallas or Kansas City to Raleigh, North Carolina, or they shut down the division. I'm like, hey, it's not my fault. I would have stayed, right? Stupid, right? But, people go, oh, you're a job hopper. Oh, we don't want you. You're not loyal. I'm like, oh, yeah. The same person has cut my hair for 40 years in Kansas City. So how's that for loyalty? Anyhow, but just talk about me because obviously you had some experience, building the model, not for profit. You work for Newhouse, the Kaufman Scholars, Big Brothers Big Sisters, that looked like the HL Alliance. As executive director was a big step up. But talk about your leadership journey and how that led you to Corey C. Griffin Foundation.
Yeah. First of all, I love what you said about a job hopper, because I was told that too. And, Jeff, I worked places like Sears and looking back, just not a good fit, in these retail jobs, standing on your feet for 8 to 10 hours, which I have no problem with that. But it was just really bad jobs. I know my first job was Long John Silver's when I was 14, which I actually love that job.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
I did the Dairy Queen, you name it. I had it. Okay. And I think that it contributed to my leadership journey because, again, at that time, I'm looking through the lens of I'm not enough. Something's wrong with me, and that was all because of childhood trauma. That was all because of my mindset. Now I look back and I'm thankful for every single role because it prepared me it not only taught me that, I'm resilient, I'm hardworking, I'm determined, I'm entrepreneurial, but it also taught me what kind of leader I want to be. I've had the best bosses, I've had the worst.
Right.
And so,
and you learn from both of them.
You learn from both of them. But at the time, I was talking to actually one of my team members, and, I tell them how I want them to be better than I am. I want to empower them. Like the legacy that we're building at Corey C. Griffin, it's not Chandra's organization. It's for the sustainability of this organization so that whoever is leading can come in the door and take it to the next level. And so I want my team to feel empowered and holistically have a safe space where they can really thrive. And I don't think I would have that type of vision as a leader or just desire had I not had environments where I didn't want to go to work. I dreaded even one of my roles that I had before I took the next step to be in the C-suite. I was working with someone who actually wouldn't promote me, who actually told me that I didn't have the leadership capability. And if it wasn't for the person who then became my supervisor, and her name is Erica Ostrowski, she changed my life. Again, another person who poured into me, believed in me, was always a great advocate for me. And until this day, I tell her thank you. And she's so humble. She doesn't like the thanks. But had she not given me the opportunity, it wouldn't have allowed me to take my next step. And so that experience was also very painful for me, because here I am where I just needed this person to believe in me and lift me up. And unfortunately, it was more, it's those dynamics of power and control, where you have someone who knows that you're needing this and knows that you want their validation, and they withhold it from you. And it was actually someone who told me, I remember being at a lunch meeting maybe a year before I left that role. And she said, "You have Stockholm syndrome." She said, "You're incredible, you're amazing, and you're letting this person tell you who you are." But it was trauma related, right? If you think about it, Jeff, with just a little bit that I've told you about my childhood, what the hell? Like, I don't know that I'm in a toxic environment. I don't know that this person is manipulating me. And I see it now. But it was some really hard challenges that led me to say, okay, I want to be a leader where people always come back and say, thank you for who you were to me.
And I sometimes blame companies in terms of, just because you're a great individual contributor and you want to take the next step in a leadership journey where you lead a team of people, or the company promotes you to lead a team. It doesn't mean, you need tools, right? To help you. And then part of it, I think, the bad leaders, one, they don't know what they don't know, and they're not self-aware usually. And they're not servant leaders, but they don't know any better sometimes. You can get in a little or as much detail as you want, but what advice would you have for others that have gone through, childhood trauma? I would love your advice there to help others.
Yeah, that is something I am so passionate about. I would, first of all, tell them to seek help. And I know we're always like therapy. And yeah, okay, I love therapy, but I'm like an EMDR, different types of therapy, because talk therapy is not always sufficient. I'm also going back to the spiritual component. I'm an energy person. I need a Reiki healer. Holistically. And I would tell them to commit to doing the work, because I'm 47. I feel like I really started having the revelation about the work that I needed to do at 40. And I will be healing for the rest of my life. And I think the biggest revelation that I've had in the last year is that it wasn't my fault, that I can't give myself or others what I don't have. And so a lot of the healing that I'm also doing is being able to support the kids that I serve. That is like the most healing part of the work that I'm able to do. And I realize that's why I love youth so much. And I love being able to see them embark on journeys that I'll never have. I'll never know what it's like to have a loving home environment, to loving people. I will never know what that's like. I'll
Right.
never know what it's like to have a traditional college
Yeah.
experience.
Right.
And so it's also like this deep place of acceptance. But the number one thing I did was I committed, and I was like, no, I choose me. I'm
Yeah.
going to fight to love myself. I'm going to fight to rewire my brain. And so every day it's a challenge for me. Sometimes I'm like, ugh, this sucks. Or sometimes you have a rough day.
Sure.
And yeah,
We're
but
human beings, right?
yeah, but
Yeah.
I've committed. And so it's been phenomenal, actually. It's nothing easy about it.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a transition in my life where I know that my next phase is writing and speaking to adults that were abused as children about their careers, because I'm very passionate about that, because there is that, your self-worth, your self-esteem impacts your career journey. And we don't talk enough about people are showing up as their whole selves at work. They're wounded. They don't know what's wrong many times. And I really just want to be an advocate.
Right. Yeah. A couple things. I think people, it's around 40 years old that people kind of realize what they need. Because I think 20s are just about finding yourself and what are you, how you're supporting yourself. What is that process? And you just don't know. I mean, brains don't fully develop till you're 25 years old. And then your 30s are like, the go years professionally. You're coming into your own, usually, give or take, but you're out of that 20s phase. And then your 40s are like, oh shit, I'm messed up, or, I need to deal with it. It happened to me. I mean, I was about 42 and, my mom died a day before my 5th birthday. And I started grieving her. Like it was and I probably had never grieved her before. I was just a kid. And I got divorced around that time. And I think it's just, I think it's that 40, in the 40s that you kind of realize all that. You mentioned something, Chandra, about EMDR. I'm not familiar with that. Can you talk about that?
So I don't want to say off the top of my head what the acronym is for, but it is this type of therapy where you actually go into the memories and you process the memory. So if you've had a very traumatic experience, your therapist sits with you, you go into that memory and you process it through your body. And so it has been proven to really be phenomenal for trauma victims. I think it's called eye desensitization, that type of therapy. I've heard definitely say look it up, but it is something that I actually did that in Kansas City before I transitioned to Boston. I haven't found anyone in Boston who can do it yet, but that was life-changing for me, because you have to process trauma. You can't stuff it down. Like you talking about losing your mom, like you have to grieve. You have to process.
Yeah, that's what I tell friends and loved ones if they lose somebody that they were close to, family members, whatever it is. Give yourself grace and make sure you grieve, because it's it's part of the healing. I also did notice on your bio that you're a founder of Be Loved, a lifestyle brand. Talk about that, a little side gig maybe.
I did that in Kansas City, and then really I feel like let it go to the wayside because of the pandemic. Yeah. But I'm in the background working on some things that align with that. So the whole thing with Beloved was doing a blog. I had written an affirmations journal. So I had a website at the time. All of that was really tied to, encouragement and talking to people about real life, this healing journey and this journey of self-love and self-worth. And so was active in that for about 2 years, and then pandemic and transition to Boston. But now, Jeff, I'm on the side. I have my affirmations journal written. Yeah. And I've committed to, between now and the end of the year, the focus is 21 days. And I actually want to focus on young adult women. I feel like teens and young adult women, like that's my sweet spot. And I feel they really need it. So what I've been doing is I want it to be visually appealing, but also just something that is simple for them to get started with this journey of reflecting. How do I develop, knowledge of my worth? How do I go deeper in knowing who I am?
what are some of the challenges you're facing at Corey C. Griffin Foundation? What do we have time for that, Chandra?
I think the challenge for me is really we're growing. We're growing, which is very exciting. The brand, I'll have to send you a hat, Jeff. Have you seen the CG hats? Like, our brand is incredible. So I'll send you some hats.
All right.
So we have a lot of movement with young professionals, a really committed volunteer donor base. Beautiful things are happening. I think it's trying to, for me, manage, like, capacity wise, what I can and cannot do.
Right.
Because we're growing so rapidly. You know, we have been embraced by the community, but it's a lot to manage, like prioritizing. I need to prioritize what I can and cannot do. I also think, just honestly, as a woman of color leading a nonprofit in Boston, I feel that it's very lonely. You know, I've met some wonderful people here who have become a part of my community, but I've also just experienced a lot of transactional relationships that just don't work for me, especially in this phase of life. And I think the challenge for me as a leader is finding balance and also just strategically scaling the organization in a way that I can manage it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've never lived in Boston, but, you know, I grew up in New York, about an hour from the city, and went to college in the city. But I think the big difference for me, you know, coming out to the Midwest and having lived here so many years, I think, you know, Kansas City is a very caring community, and people, and I'm not saying people in Boston don't care, but it's this, you know, it's a different lifestyle. Like, you know, the quality of life here is, you know, we have modern things. You know, Boston was built, you know, in the 1700s, basically. I mean, think about it. And, you know, the roads are narrower, and the, you know, the infrastructure is different, and, you know, people have longer commutes, and it's different. So, has that been your biggest challenge, kind of moving from a Kansas City to a Boston and kind of getting that?
Yes. And I mean, let's just have real conversations. So talk about trauma triggers, because I'm a Southern girl, like very much to the core. And like you said, Kansas City it's a caring community, and that's where I grew up for 33 years. And then I come to the Northeast, and I just, you know, when I first moved here, I'm living in downtown Boston because one of my sisters lives here, and she's like, Chandra, you need to experience living downtown. And so, Jeff, I'm like, okay, live downtown, got a great high rise because it's the pandemic, so great deal. Yeah. And I start seeing people going on these tours with people dressed up like Davy Crockett and like reenactments, and I'm like, right, what is happening? You know, and I'm like, what is happening? Because that's just so, like, not my life.
Right.
And so I just definitely, Corey's dad, Rob, he calls me legally blonde. He's like, it's like Elle Woods.
Yeah, funny.
Yeah, and that, if I could just, that's my experience in Boston. It's like Elle Woods going to Harvard.
That is funny. I have to ask you, I'm a New York Yankees and New York Jets fan, so hopefully you're not a Red Sox or Patriots fan. Please tell me.
No, Joel would kill me. Okay, so I have to say Matthew Slater, who played for the Patriots, is on our board. Love him. So I can't say that I'm not a Patriots fan.
Okay. I understand.
I don't know anything about the Red Sox. And Joel is like, Chandra, at what point are you going to go to Fenway Park? And I'm like, I don't know.
That's funny.
I am a Yankees fan because I love the hat. Always love the hat. Yes.
Very popular hat, even for non-baseball fans. So I love that. Chandra, any asks of the listeners for the Corey C. Griffin Foundation?
I would say my ask would be definitely please visit our website and just learn more about our work. You know, I'm biased, but Corey C. Griffin Foundation is a very unique organization in that it is the example of a family that took a terrible tragedy and decided to be triumphant. in a city like Boston that I feel is still, there's a lot of segregation and a lot of systemic barriers. This organization has really created a wonderful pipeline of people, especially young professionals who desire to go into diverse communities and uplift and pour into the lives of those kids. Our kids, not those kids, our kids.
Right.
My role is different, and this is really because of Corey's family. They are not like big donate to us people. Like, yes, we fundraise, and we do that through the sponsorships of our special events. So we do 2 events a year. We do Corey Fest, which is a country music festival that Corey loved country music. So every year we have a headliner. So this year we have Dustin Lynch, November 1st at the House of Blues. So that's one of our major fundraisers. So we raised, the goal is $2 million from that event. And we grant out those funds to charities. And then the other major event that we do is the Boston Winter Ball. That'll be March 6th. That's a black tie gala, and we hold it at the Omni in Boston. And the funny story about that is that many years ago when Corey was in college, he started like the Boston Winter Ball to bring women. He loved women. So he created this event to have women show up and attend. And now it's grown to the place. I think next year will be our 18th year. And our goal is $2 million from that event. And then we participate in the Boston Marathon. And Jeff, I have to tell you, when I was in Kansas City, I didn't understand why people love the marathon. It is just an extraordinary experience to be out and cheer on the runners. So now we raise about $300,000 a year from that event.
Wow.
So just encourage people, check out our website, learn more about our organization, and if you're interested in getting involved. But I have a deep love for this organization, for Corey's parents, for the community of kids that we're serving.
Yeah, that's so nice. And any plans to run the Boston Marathon anytime
Absolutely
soon?
Not. But I can tell you that I have a good outfit, when I'm out there.
No doubt about that. I mean, you were the best dressed associate starting at Sears and every other job you had, except maybe not Dairy Queen because you had to wear a uniform there.
But I had long nails. That was like...
There you go. I love it. Chandra, I love helping 2 groups of people. One's that a very young adult, whether it's post-high school or post-college, as they begin their professional journey and get that first post-education job. What advice would you have for them as they begin that journey?
I would say, number one, self-worth is everything. So, really taking the time to read and invest in self-development, developing healthy self-esteem, really making sure that they're empowering themselves with their physical, mental, and emotional health. So leaning into, not only standard education, but healthy community, seeking out mentors and advisors. And that will actually help propel them into having the confidence and the clarity that they need in their careers. I would also say to give yourself freedom to explore, give yourself freedom to fail and make mistakes. But when you believe in yourself and when you are your biggest advocate, nothing else matters, because when you fall, you'll get up. When you have a hard day, the next day it'll be better. But the one person that you have to bet on is yourself. Because at the end of the day, it's just you. And if you're a person of faith, God, that's it at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you. The second group is, if you recall that first time when you went from an individual contributor to being responsible for a team of people and began that leadership journey for you, what advice would you have for that group?
To treat people the way you want to be treated. I know that that's like probably the most overused, but it is. It's like really put yourself in someone else's shoes and be to your team who you needed, and also think about the legacy that you are leaving and how you treat others, because you're leaving an imprint. You set the tone for your environment. And it is really important to lead with knowing that what you give, you get, whether it's good or bad. And so really making the decision that you want to be good to your people, you want to create a safe space, you want people to outshine you. There's no room for leaders to be threatened by others, and that you have to think about you're sowing seeds for the future in every way, shape, or form.
Yes. Chandra, thank you so much for coming on the Corporate Couch today. You're a gift to any organization you get to lead. I love your spirit, your energy. You have a beautiful soul. So thank you for coming on the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. You're such a joy to talk with, and I hope to talk to you soon, and I wish you continued success with your work.
Thank you. What fantastic energy Chandra has. Oh my God, she just comes through the screen. But anytime you can get The Godfather, Elle Woods wearing Yankee hats, Yankee baseball caps in Boston, how she loved Long John Silver's out of her 25 jobs, Voodoo. I mean, it's a good episode.
All that in one episode.
Yeah,
and we tied it all together.
Right. And she did great work in Kansas City for a lot of not-for-profits and other things. And now she's in Boston at the Griffin Foundation. But yeah, I just thought it was fantastic. Even I had to look up the Stockholm Syndrome, which is basically was, I think, coined in 1973. It's about like not falling in love with your captors, or abusers, but you're empathetic to them to a weird
sympathizing
extent.
with them. Yeah.
I had to look that up. So that was, and one of her friends, mentors, said that her relationship with a toxic manager was the Stockholm Syndrome.
Didn't even realize she was in a toxic situation.
Right. Yeah.
And people that are in captivity like that don't have the perspective of being able to step away from it and look backwards, and that's how she was. She was only looking at it from inside.
And talk about your youth, shaping you, which obviously it does for all of us. But she was 10 years old and she took care of 3 of her younger siblings. So talk about leadership lessons, at a young age. Yeah, I don't know. I could have talked to her a lot longer. Joe, what'd you get out of the episode?
I thought it was an amazing interview. Her grandmother wouldn't let her off the porch. That was something else.
Right.
So she had to,
and mispronounced her name.
Mispronounced her name. Didn't know how to spell or pronounce her name, either one. So it was amazing in how somebody can rise from that kind of childhood and grow into what she has grown into now. I think is amazing. The whole business about don't forget that voodoo is really a thing, especially in New Orleans.
Right.
That I've always thought that New Orleans is one of those. There are some pockets in the country that are like a whole nother country. Like obviously Texas is a whole nother country, but even Oklahoma is, and New York is, and Southern California is, and Las Vegas is, perhaps Orlando is, but New Orleans is definitely a whole nother country. It's like it's a whole different culture, a whole different language, whole different everything, and that's what she grew up in and grew out of. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, the voodoo they passed a book of spells down through generations of the family,
and they were professional voodooists, right? That's how they earn their living.
I think so, yeah.
So one thing that this shows us is that you can't blame your current status in life on how you were raised or what you grew up with. She has definitely proved that. I don't like it when people say that, well, I couldn't have achieved anything better because I didn't have a storied childhood like a lot of people did, She had all these things going against her, raising her children or raising her siblings, and growing up poor, and made this of herself. She said, "I've got to go through and get my master's degree. I've just got to," and so she did. And I think that it's a proof. I'll tell you another one that's a proof of that is if you think of Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas grew up in a very similar situation as Chandra did. And nobody in his family had ever graduated from high school. And he built for himself into a successful law career and a Supreme Court justice. And if people can do that, come out of that kind of environment into that, people have no excuse anymore. It was an amazing interview. I really enjoyed it.
One other insight I had with her, she's talked about starting some serious healing work at 40 from some childhood trauma. And I, for me, I always had, it happened to me in my 40s, early 40s. I think people in their 40s start to realize, 20s is just figuring out what you're doing in life kind of thing. 30s, you're kind of growing both professionally and hopefully personally. But, but I think your 40s, you start reflecting, and that's when I would say shit from childhood starts boiling up. I don't know. That's just my unprofessional take.
I think that's very true. When you're in your 40-ish, that's when you have this sudden realization, as I did. You have a sudden realization that there is more life behind you than there is ahead of you. And not only that, the life that is ahead of you is going by exponentially faster all the time. That's where people start thinking, as I did, if you have a bucket list, you need to start working on that. If you haven't been working on it for the last 10 years or so, you got some catching up to do. And you just start evaluating everything about yourself. Because one thing that happens when you're 40-ish, you start to have an appreciation for what is your later life going to be like. It's going to be pretty much like what it is. Maybe you're going to increase your 401k a little bit better, but this is kind of it. I remember when I was 20 and just entering the business world, and I would think about what would my retirement look like. I had no idea. I didn't have any way of knowing what I was going to do or what I was going to be like or what my quality of life was going to be or how I was going to deal with my past or anything like that. I remember thinking, I have no idea what it's going to be. When you're 40-ish, you do know, and you start dealing with that reality. It was a great interview.
Yeah. Joe, what's going on in the life of Joe today?
Man, I learned something this week. I learned that it is not a good idea to criticize my girlfriend's makeup because I told her that she had drawn her eyebrows too high. She was surprised.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.